Okay, we're bang on the hour. I might make a start. Welcome to this ACOM webinar, Powering the Future, Practical Insights to Build Social License for Better Project Outcomes. My name is Craig Bearsley. I lead ACOM's energy business for Australia and New Zealand. Like you all, we care about how the energy transition is being delivered. With the help of our presenters today, we want to explore a very important aspect of our energy transition, that of social license, and drill down into some of the links between social license, project governance, supply chain, and community consultation. But before we begin, I'd like to first start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia. We pay respects to elders both past and present, and to emerging community leaders. We recognise and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the land and waters. Here are also to those joining us from New Zealand today, tēnā koutou, welcome. In terms of format, we have three presenters joining us today, each who will drill down into a different aspect of the topic of social license in the energy sector. Christina Ringwood will introduce the concept of social license and the elements that contribute to successful social license strategy. Our second speaker, George Smythe, will be exploring supply chain risks and its linkages to project resilience and maintaining social license in the energy sector. Our final presenter will be Mary Diab, who will look at social license from the perspective of the community and how we engage throughout the project lifecycle. I'd like to thank all of you on the call who completed the survey when registering for this webinar. The responses you provided have been very useful and used to guide the content to be covered today. Hopefully, we will be addressing the aspects of social license that are most relevant to you and your organisation. At the end of our presentations, we have allowed time for speakers to respond to your questions. Please enter any questions you have in the Q&A chat function, which is at the top of your screen. Hopefully, you can all find that anytime during the session. The questions you submit will not be visible to the others on the call, and we will not be identifying the submitters, so you really can ask anything. Please note also the session will be recorded and is provided for general information only and not to be considered legal or professional advice. So why are we here today and now we're talking about social license? It's a term that's relatively new to me and to many of us in the energy sector. So what has changed? Our existing electricity system of generators and transmission that we all rely on to live and work was largely built in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. A truly remarkable feat of coordinated investments, planning, and engineering. However, this was a very different time. Climate change was not yet part of the public debate. The internet was not yet imagined. And like the coal we burnt, much of the materials and equipment used to build our interconnected system were proudly Australian and New Zealand made. We have not seen electricity infrastructure development on this scale in the last 30 years, but that is all about to change. The energy transition has given rise to genuine concerns about our ability to keep the lights on in the years ahead. And we are again faced with an immense infrastructure delivery challenge. One of the most significant shifts in this time has been in terms of community expectations. The way this infrastructure will be planned and delivered must and will be very different this time around. New energy infrastructure can cause significant community concern, which can quickly be amplified to outrage by the speed of modern media and growing negative sentiment towards these projects. As a result, we are now seeing project delays, waning investor confidence, increasing political pressure, misinformation, and growing mistrust. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Christina Ringwood. Christina supports organisations to develop practical social licence strategies that mitigate project risk and build community and stakeholder trust. Leveraging these insights, Christina will delve into the elements of social licence, addressing first its definition and exploring integrated approaches to achieve this crucial community endorsement. Welcome, Christina. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Craig. And it is really great to be here today and share some insights and learnings from my work with many organizations in the area of social license. These survey results show the level of community dissatisfaction about current engagement around renewable energy projects. There are significant concerns about how well organizations engage with community about project impacts. But industry and government organizations understand these concerns well. And the responses to our short survey, many of you filled out for the seminar, identified building community trust as the biggest issue. In response, organizations are moving rapidly to develop new frameworks to support better engagement. And some are shown here, for example, the recent federal government's community engagement review, calling for rating schemes around community engagement, and better community complaint processes. And the Victorian Transmission Investment Framework focuses on earlier engagement and more benefits and compensation to communities hosting infrastructure. And other states have developed more. These frameworks and others set a new higher bar on community engagement and social license. But the challenge is that we urgently need to be doing this better now if we are to achieve the required investment in the energy transition and keep the lights on in the years ahead. While there's a lot of focus on better community engagement and social license, what exactly do organizations have to do differently in their project management to achieve this step change? Because clearly the current way of working has not been enough to manage the greater complexity facing new projects, such as multiple stakeholders and their changing expectations. How do we actually set up and manage these projects if we are to achieve this change? The term social license is often used, and many organizations have set social license goals, but it is not always clear what is meant by this term. And in this presentation, I'd like to ask, what is social license and what are the practical elements of a social license approach that is required for success? So a common definition is here. Social license is the ongoing acceptance granted to an organization by the community and its stakeholders. This is all about earning trust for your organizations to deliver and run new projects. By earning social license, organizations actually build more than just the current acceptance for their project. They build a longer-term resilience right through the project lifecycle from planning, operation, and ongoing maintenance. This is because you earn trust by bringing your stakeholders with you along the journey in a transparent way. In moments when you face issues over complaints, delays, or technical challenges, the credibility you have earned with this more transparent approach can support you in terms of community trust. So in my experience working with major infrastructure, energy, mining companies, social license is more than great community consultation in the field. It needs to be underpinned by robust project management foundations that reflect the complexity of the project within the context of multiple stakeholders and changing expectations. So how do you do this? A more strategic and integrated approach that builds social license into the project DNA is required for success. I've collated some of the key elements of this approach from my work with different organizations and sectors, and I'll provide more detail on the next few slides. They include a governance framework that integrates social license across all key disciplines, an internal team culture that displays transparency and empathy for stakeholders, risk assessments that consider stakeholder sentiment in addition to the technical hazards that we already do so well, and communication that provides a balanced project narrative and doesn't just sell the benefits, and engagement that adopts a collaborative approach and builds trust. So let's look at the first element, governance. Many of our projects are set up with the key drivers of cost, time, performance, but this means that community engagement and other disciplines can be siloed and not effectively influence project decisions in the right way. The aim is to move to an integrated governance structure where social license risks and opportunities actually set the overarching project strategy, and the overall aim is to build trust in the ability of that organization to deliver the project. This requires integration of all disciplines, including technical design, environment, engagement, communications, with all disciplines working together at the right level to achieve trust or social license. This also includes understanding social license in the supply chain and procurement aspects that my colleague George Smythe will talk about next. We've seen how a business as usual project culture focused on cost and time has not really worked well enough to address many of the complexities facing renewable energy projects. Communities can tell a project team's culture a mile off in the way the team communicates and engages. To build trust, a more collaborative and empathetic culture within the team is required that can actually listen and respond to stakeholder concerns. For example, it's much better for the project to share credit for good performance with stakeholders. Why not adopt a posture of we're going to do better, or even our stakeholders forced us to change? This reflects a very open mindset that invites stakeholder collaboration. And this shift in team culture also requires a project level direction and training to ensure the team is all aligned. In my experience, projects rarely fail on technical grounds. They are delayed or face cancellation because of outrage and issues the community feels are important. We have excellent technical risk assessment processes. However, many don't really effectively address social or outrage risk, even though these elements are now well understood and documented. How can we develop robust strategies if social risk is not effectively identified? It is more effective to look at risk holistically, where risk equals the technical hazard plus the community sentiment or outrage. This means that it's key to include outrage risks like transparency. We talk a lot about transparency, but what do we actually mean? And how transparent should we be? Another risk is control. How do we share control of key processes with the community? Responsiveness. How responsive are we to stakeholder concerns? And another important one, fairness. How do we actually address aspects of fairness? This provides a holistic picture of risks facing the organisation. And then there's the question of how well social licence risks are actually escalated through an organisation. How effective is our process to track and address emerging concerns in the field before they become broader outrage issues on the front page of newspapers? The fourth element is communications. I've seen recent examples of projects in Australia, for example, where decisions about the project is made internally by the project team, announced to the market, and then defended. This is a defensive approach that can end up with major project delays and community and regulatory concerns. You cannot retrofit trust into this approach. The opportunity is to move to a position where the organisation declares the dilemma it is facing with the transition to renewable energy and communicates a clear narrative for how that organisation is going to contribute to this. It acknowledges the actual community concerns and commits to co-developing a plan with stakeholders and transparently sharing its progress, both the good news as well as the challenges. And how often do we see such a transparent summary on organisations' websites? This is actually a risk communications approach that ensures stakeholders feel that their concerns have really been heard. It's also about training the project team so they're confident when speaking to the community. The last element is engagement, and my colleague, Mary Diab, will provide much more detail with some practical project examples and successes about how to do this better. But I'd just like to emphasise the importance of adopting a collaborative approach when actually building elements of the project strategy with stakeholders in the community. For example, there are key processes that will benefit from engagement, like co-designing community benefits processes, route options, inclusions of First Nations consideration in design, and sustainability opportunities. And I've seen a number of organisations doing some of these aspects pretty well. And actually defining what success would look like for the project vision would benefit from community involvement too. So in summary, I hope this brief overview has shown you the practical elements that make up effective social licence strategies. The aim is to move from a business as usual project management approach to a strategic integrated approach that aims to achieve social licence or trust from your community. This is a complex challenge to get right and requires new ways of doing things together, both as a project team and also with the community. Please consider checking your current strategy against these 5 elements: a social licence strategy that has an integrated approach, a team culture that collaborates effectively, risk assessment that considers stakeholder outrage as well as the technical hazards, the use of risk communications to respond to actual stakeholder concerns, and engagement that builds the project strategy in collaboration with the community. Thanks for your time again today, and I'll hand back to Craig.
Thank you, Christina. That was fantastic. I think that was the most complete and accessible overview of social license that I've personally ever heard. So thank you. I appreciate that. I particularly like the view you present of social license as an enduring project asset that can build resilience, which stays with the project throughout its operating life. Taking this view in our industry will most certainly help to make the case for adequate early investment in project social license strategy. So that's a new point for me, certainly. You also raised a really good point about the bar having been raised with regards to community expectations. I'm interested to get your views on where we are now, and will we ever be in a position where the ground rules of achieving social license are fully established, or if not, how do you see this continuing to evolve in the future?
So will we ever achieve a social license? Look, fantastic question. And yes, I mean, I've worked with projects that have achieved trust from their communities and their social license to operate. And Mary will undoubtedly outline a few examples too. But there is a significant complexity for transmission projects in terms of their scale and the timeline of their planning and construction. That's quite different to gaining trust for a new road intersection or a mine that actually just sits in one location. An issue in one part of the project can escalate and inform impacts or perceptions in another. So I guess I have 2 points. One is the reality is that expectations are changing all the time and will continue to change, and communities will continue to demand more involvement and control over project impacts. Issues will be debated and new approaches to minimize impact will be developed. An additional point is that we probably need to define what success looks like. We can't presume to have 100% of the community happy with all the plans, especially in these complex projects. But can the community be impressed with the process and feel like they can trust the proponent to engage and that their concerns have been heard and incorporated to a high degree in plans? We can't stay still, and I guess there'll be continuous pressure for us to change. And it was the same with safety and environment, I guess, 20 years ago. And as we develop safety and environmental systems, we need to develop the project tools for project teams to better understand emerging issues and respond early before they become risks to the project. And I guess that's why I like to focus on the governance aspect of the presentation today.
Thanks, Christina. I think that's a really good point around the focus on governance. Many of these projects that we're talking about today will take years and some decades to be fully developed. So things will change in that time, undoubtedly. If anyone has any other questions for Christina, please drop those in the Q&A function and we'll pick these up at the end of the session. I haven't seen too many questions come through just yet, but I'll be checking that feed as we go. Our next presenter is George Smythe, brings global experience in supply chain assurance, environmental impact assessment, and project resilience. George will be discussing potential supply risks and exploring opportunities to enhance project resilience and social license outcomes. Welcome, George. Over to you.
Thanks, Craig. As mentioned, now we're moving on to supply chains and social license. Currently, I work on a daily basis in supply chain risk services, which involves international manufacturing sites with a focus in China, Vietnam, and India, and collaboration with AECOM offices across the globe. I look forward to sharing some insights from this experience and how they are relevant to large-scale energy projects. There's a significant spend required in the energy sector. How to ensure the supply chain associated with this major investment protects workers and the environment, is resilient to shocks to supply chain continuity, and protects the reputation and social license of projects. To explore this, I'll provide, firstly, a high-level introduction to supply chain risks with a focus on environment and social topics. Also outline some recommended actions, the key element being a robust, multi-tiered risk management approach, and also highlight some opportunities to go beyond minimum requirements to achieve greater project outcomes. A few things in recent years have increased awareness of vulnerabilities in supply chains. We've seen them regularly featured in the media. Firstly, the COVID-19 global pandemic, which created a surge in demand for certain products and also generated supply chain disruptions such as factory shutdowns. And recently, we've seen increased geopolitical tensions. For example, between the US and China, with terms such as reshoring, bringing some industries back, and friendshoring, setting up supply chains in countries that are political allies. For the energy industry, there are supply challenges. Supply chains are stretched, and the challenges include manufacturing output, raw material supply, logistics, and quality. This presentation focuses on the environmental and social risks that have the potential to worsen these challenges and damage company and project reputation. Now, every country has some risks, but today I'll touch briefly on China and India. China and India are two countries that play crucial roles in supply chains of numerous industries, including energy. This slide lists some key permits in these countries. There are environmental permits, for example, environmental impact assessment approval and pollution discharge permits in China. Operational permits like the consent to establish, or CTE, and consent to operate, or CTO, in India, and safety permits such as the fire protection check and acceptance in China and fire and notice of completion in India. How do these permits and approvals pose a threat to supply chain resilience and project reputation? Well, firstly, there are financial penalties for suppliers for non-compliance with permit requirements. And more significantly, the permits pose a potential shutdown risk from local government authorities if the breach is significant enough. These incidents can impact the reputation of the supply chain and associated project and are indicative of inadequate environmental, labour or safety systems. Furthermore, they're very concerning for supply chain continuity, in particular if the shutdown occurs at a sole sourced or strategic supplier. Supply chain managers should implement thorough risk assessments to uncover potential vulnerabilities and risks in primary and sub-tier suppliers. The focus of these assessments should be, firstly, risk to worker, such as fire and machine safety, risk to the environment, including air and water emissions, and risk to supply chain continuity, business critical shutdown risks, such as the permits described in the previous slide. So acknowledging there are risks in the supply chain and that we should conduct a robust risk review, where do we start? Well, suppliers with a direct business relationship or supply contract should be the starting point for these risk assessments. This graph displays a multi-tier supply chain with primary and sub-tier suppliers. You have the primary or original equipment manufacturer at the top, and these are the suppliers that assemble the final product. Formal supply agreements with these primary suppliers and also tier ones, depending on the industry type or product characteristic, are normally set up. So you have a formal contract with these primary or tier ones. These primary suppliers should be the focus of assessments that identify risks to worker, environment, and risk to supply chain continuity. So following on from the assessments at the primary suppliers, it is recommended to review risks in the sub-tier supply chain. So looking at your tier ones, your tier twos, and even your tier N. Considering limited resources available for risk management, how do you manage risks in the sub-tier supply chain effectively? Well, prioritization of sites risk assessment should be based on two key considerations. Firstly, strategic suppliers. Those suppliers that bring key benefits to the supply chain. And secondly, site locations and industries that pose the highest risk to worker, the environment, and supply chain continuity. These considerations will help prioritize where budget for supply chain risk management should be allocated. I'll now go into some further details on strategic suppliers. If a supplier satisfies one or more of the following criteria, they are deemed strategic. Firstly, sole sourced. They may be the only supplier for a particular component. 2, they may be a quality leader for a particular part that is critical to overall performance of a product or piece of equipment. Thirdly, they may be a cost leader, a supplier that keeps other sub-tier suppliers honest on pricing, which assists with overall cost management in the supply chain. And finally, technology considerations. Those suppliers that provide the best and newest tech that drive innovation in the final product. In summary, strategic suppliers that bring key benefits to the supply chain should be the next priority for risk assessments, following on from the primary suppliers at the top of the supply chain. In addition to identifying strategic suppliers, sub-tier suppliers that pose the highest risk to the environment or worker based on site location and industry type should also be the focus of risk assessment activities. Location considerations are numerous, including countries with developing environmental or safety regulations, plus increasing enforcement of these regulations. For example, we've seen many shutdown cases in India under local air and water acts. Over 100 in the state of Karnataka, where Bangalore is located, in the last 12 months alone. Also, countries or regions with known labour risks need to be considered. For example, Xinjiang in China. There are also numerous industry considerations, such as industries with known environmental challenges. For example, industries that are more water intensive, like steelmaking or aluminium finishing. Now, this graph aims to summarise this risk management guidance and explain where the priority for risk identification and management should be in the sub-tier supply chain following review of primary suppliers. The highest risk to supply chain resilience and project reputation is up the top left corner with the red dot. This area is concerning as the supplier is sole sourced, i.e. the only one that makes that component, and located in a high risk location, could be China or India, and is a high risk industry with known challenges such as air or water emissions. So suppliers that fit in that top left corner are the highest priority for risk identification and management. As the number of suppliers for particular sub-tier input increases and or the location and industry risk decreases, the need for risk review is reduced, trending towards that green dot. Now, beyond a robust risk management process, there are opportunities to enhance resilience, reputation, and social license outcomes. Firstly, the procurement process. The tender process, including supply agreements, should include requirements for management of environment and social risks, which can be informed by outcomes from the risk assessment described earlier in this presentation. This could include evidence of application and receipt of key environmental and safety permits, and evidence of forced labour policies, procedures, and importantly, reporting. Furthermore, there are opportunities to embed references in supply contracts to ongoing compliance with particular permits. For example, the pollution discharge permit would be a priority. And finally, the procurement process can require that supply policies and procedures are aligned with relevant international standards. For example, ISO 20400, sustainable procurement. And there's a second opportunity in relation to legislative requirements. There are opportunities to go beyond minimum reporting requirements under the Commonwealth's Modern Slavery Act. The strongest annual statements submitted under this Act describe in detail their business operations, and for supply chains that have gone beyond review and explanation of their primary suppliers and into their sub-tier suppliers, which is aligned and consistent with a multi-tier risk management approach. Key takeaways. Supply chain continuity, reputation, and social license are at risk due to supply chain issues. But there are actions and opportunities in this space, including 1. Implementation of a risk management approach, which is focused on primary suppliers at the top of the supply chain, plus strategic and high-risk sub-tier suppliers. Secondly, embedding risk assessment learnings and outcomes into the procurement process through key milestones and contracts. And thirdly, extending beyond minimum actions and reporting requirements where possible, which can yield overall risk management and reputation benefits. Thank you, and I'll pass back to Craig now.
Thanks, George. I have to be honest, when we first discussed the topic for this webinar, I was a little unsure of how supply chain fitted in. However, I think your unique perspective on social license and insights are in fact very timely. Lead times I'm certainly seeing for key equipment on these projects are stretching out into years, and costs seem to be constantly escalating. Supply chain is undoubtedly top of mind for many on the call today. However, I think the significant associated reputational, environmental, and social risks that you've highlighted have not always been at the forefront in our industry, and certainly not always top of mind for myself. So that's clearly going to need to change. So thank you for bringing that to the attention of the industry. I am interested to get your view on how local procurement may be used to help mitigate some supply chain risks and improve social license outcomes, or what opportunities there may be to investigate local procurement options.
It's a good question, Craig. I think there's opportunities for local procurement during construction for sure, and then operation phase. For the supply chain of necessary equipment or parts, local procurement is a challenge, with obviously key considerations being cost and local production capabilities. I mean, I think there could be opportunities for local procurement for certain parts. I mean, a focus could be to supplement the number of suppliers for a certain component that has been identified as sole sourced or having very limited suppliers in a higher risk location. A bit like I was describing before in that near that red dot in that graph, those areas are most concerning, and you could get benefits to the supply chain by supplementing supply in that area. So I'd suggest a supply chain mapping exercise where you map out the supply chain, and if you can identify parts or inputs that could be locally sourced, then I think the biggest benefits to the supply chain will be supplementing supply in parts of the supply chain that bring the greatest risk. Once again, that top left corner near the red dot in that summary graph I was talking about. So yeah, mapping exercise and then identifying the highest risks and potential benefits.
Brilliant. Thanks, George. Again, if there are any other additional questions for George, please drop those in the Q&A function. If you haven't found that button, it's still there. It should still be there at the top of your screens. Our third and final presenter today is Mary Diab. Mary has delivered communications and engagement programs for some of Australia's largest and most complex infrastructure projects. Mary and her team are at the front line of building understanding and trust in the community and resolving stakeholder concerns to establish a social license for these projects. In the session, Mary will delve into community consultation challenges and provide insights on effective strategies to support achievement of an enduring social license. Welcome, Mary. Pass over to you.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks to Christina and George who touched on important aspects to achieving a social license with the community. From the survey response, I see a lot of you are interested in finding out more about how we engage better with the community on transmission projects. Today, I'm going to talk through 3 recurring challenges I have experienced and I hear about, 3 things we can do to avoid these challenges and help build a social license, and 3 takeaways and action, but in regard to actions we can think about to turn things around. As we've seen in the media and some of us have experienced personally, opposition to transmission projects has rapidly emerged across all states. As Craig mentioned, this transition can't be rolled out the way large-scale projects were decades ago. I'm talking about my own personal experience when I was involved in the Lismore to Mullumbimby 132 kV line in 1994. That's some time ago. The consultation approach for this project was decide on a route, announce it, and then go out and defend it. And some more recent large linear infrastructure projects have taken this same approach and have been met with the same opposition. So we need to change the way we face these challenges and are delivering this infrastructure. Based on my experience, engagement well done improves social, environmental, and economic outcomes and increases trust in the democratic process. Now I'm going to go through 3 recurring challenges I've seen and dealt with on transmission and linear projects. The first one is opposition to either a route that's been decided on or a project. Nothing gets a community worked up than decisions that have been made which impact them and the community but haven't involved them. More often than not, a community hears about a project when key decisions are made, leaving little space for input. In addition, factors which contribute to this opposition include there are no foreseeable benefits to communities that are expected to carry the burden of long overhead transmission lines, or most of the benefits in terms of economic growth, employment, and regional development are often seen at the end of the line. The second challenge I've seen and experienced is landowner opposition, and this is either due to poorly managed property impacts and/or acquisition. Transmission projects are located where there are generational and lifestyle farms in rural areas. These generational farms are active businesses, and farmers have a very strong attachment to the land. Landowner ties must be understood and genuinely considered. This is more than compensation and incentives, and if we just focus on that, it will really erode credibility. We also need to note the mental burden imposed on landowners when they are trying to protect their biggest asset. Landowners have stated that they feel the infrastructure is imposed on them. And I recently saw an interview with the Farmers Federation president, and he stated that farmers aren't against the infrastructure, they just want to be consulted early so that there is consideration of the farming practices, the equipment they use, and farm viability. I experienced this similar opposition when I worked on the longest greenfield section on the Inland Rail program. It was 300 kilometres long. The opposition was due to going out with an alignment, and we were met with very strong opposition. We then went back and met with over 100 landowners to understand their issues and concerns and relook at options. It resulted in a lot of rework. The third challenge is that we're told the engagement process is inadequate or the communication is poor. And this typically arises because no early engagement has taken place during the project planning phase. So there's no consideration of social values, environmental aspects in the project. And the consultation is seen as a tick in the box exercise, disingenuous, and therefore lacks credibility. In addition, the consultation program is often driven by the project program, and insufficient time is allowed for genuine and meaningful consultation. So now I'm going to touch on 3 actions we can take to reduce opposition and build a social licence. George did touch on supply chain. So I think there's a real opportunity to engage better with industry and identify and develop messages about business opportunities, the skills and employment opportunities available. And this can be through targeted industry engagement and collateral when information about information on your project. This also provides an opportunity to develop clear messaging about the regional and local opportunities in regard to local business skills and employment opportunities that will be available through the delivery of your work. On the Newell Highway Program Alliance I was involved in, we engaged numerous subcontractors, and this was achieved by hosting supplier information sessions. This helped identify local resources, businesses, and skills available, which we then passed on to contractors that were implementing the work. This improved the social benefits and also local capacity, and we were able to also capitalise on the local knowledge that we had. The other action we can take is, and I did talk about landowner impacts, is engaging a property acquisition case manager. Property acquisition is a specialised field. A dedicated land acquisition case manager will explain the quite complicated acquisition process early to landowners, give them time to understand it, ask questions and seek advice. It also provides a direct and consistent point of contact, which will build and maintain positive relationships and trust with affected landowners. And the third point I'd like to raise, which Christina also touched on, is team culture. So social performance should be everybody's responsibility. To navigate the complexities and challenges and promote meaningful social value, it must be part of a team culture. We need to look for proactive practices that acknowledge and address community concerns and expectations. and will help support, manage social risks and enhance social contribution of host communities through better project outcomes. How do we do this? We need to shift the mindset and embed social considerations right through a project. The engagement process will support this through open dialogue with stakeholders and enable local knowledge and, where appropriate, input into decision-making processes. So I do have 3 takeaways for you and three things I'd like you to ponder, which may help you build a social licence. Is social performance embedded in your governance and project team? I say this because embedding this can drive better outcomes and enhance social acceptance and build that social licence. Another question is, do you need to assign a dedicated land case manager or even an agricultural economist to manage landowner issues? Farmers like to speak to someone who speaks their language. And finally, does your engagement program provide sufficient time for genuine and meaningful engagement and let people be listened to? If not, is your engagement program at risk? So I hope that gives you something to ponder and provide some insights. And now I'm going to hand over to Craig.
Thank you, Mary. Plenty to ponder there, I think. It really is fantastic to hear your first-hand experience. I think you clearly have a deep appreciation of community concerns, which have been hard-earned in the field. You and Christina both spoke a number of times about the importance of early involvement of the community. I'm interested to hear a little bit more from you about opportunities that may exist for more collaborative planning with the community involved.
Yeah, a really good question, because this is something that the community are asking for. I guess there are a number of opportunities for the community to be involved in the decision-making process. I've seen that through either setting up community reference groups or, and this goes beyond just including community leaders, but these reference groups do enable really good diversity of community members to participate and be involved in decision-making processes. I guess what's really important if you do get the community involved in the planning process is to articulate well right from the outset what the project objectives are, what the negotiables and what the non-negotiables are. What I've also seen really well is I've worked on projects where community members have participated in value management workshops, and this really provides good insight into how objectives are, decision-making into objectives, weightings, and the rationale behind decisions that are made to come up with project outcomes. And they're able to go back and relay that to their constituents or other community members. I think one thing to keep in mind is all the processes we implement, we're always going to have people that are not happy with the outcome. But we need to think about implementing a process that stands up to scrutiny and the community genuinely feel they've been consulted and had the opportunity to be involved.
Yeah, fantastic answer. Thanks, Mary. We are at the Q&A stage of our session today, so I might open up the Q&A feed and pick out a couple here. While I actually have you on the mic, Mary, the first one I think relates quite closely to the topics you've been discussing. What do you think can be done where the community is strongly opposed to a project and unwilling to engage in any sort of meaningful consultation or collaboration?
Yeah, good question, because we hear this in the media a lot, where communities are so opposed to a project, they protest and don't want to be engaged. Based on my experience, what I have seen is it's probably a certain percentage of the community that are lobbying a project, but there is the silent minority. So it's about having a robust process where we enable everyone to have their say and provide different avenues to communicate with the community. So where this has been done really well is using different methods and just continuing to keep the lines of communication open. And people may not want to engage in a large forum, but when you approach them and provide the avenue for that communication, you do find that they do want to sit down with you and have a chat. So I've worked on a couple of projects where they have been very heated, and community members front up to an information session, and they may not say anything because the vocal ones overtake the room. But what we have done, what I have found works really well, is having discussion tables, or after that, people can book in to have a one-on-one. You do find that people stick around, they do want to have a chat, and they don't feel comfortable because they feel that they're almost silent by the vocal ones. So what I can say is persist, provide a number of opportunities, and people will be willing to be engaged when they see that you're being genuine and putting the work in to hear from them.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I like that answer. That sometimes we forget that the community is much broader than just the maybe the extreme views on any project or situation that we see presented in media or in other forums. I'll read out this next question. I think maybe Christina, you might be the right person to address it. With transmission projects, are we missing a layer of social license at the government strategic planning level? What role does the lack of a cohesive narrative from government as to which energy technologies are required to keep the lights on have for the social license of individual projects? I think largely the role of government in telling that story.
Yeah, well, great question. I certainly am seeing state and federal governments releasing stories around transmission and the need for our transition to renewable energy. So the stories are there. Whether or not they're clear enough yet, maybe they're still in a development stage. You know, we're coming to this at such a fast pace, but we do need to move faster and be clearer about what the story is and why do we need to move down the road in different technologies. I think there's also, you know, while government is working that out, I think there's a real opportunity for proponents to actually clarify the narrative in any case, much better than we are currently doing, and really, you know, clarify for themselves what their role, what the challenge is, what their role is in contributing to the solution, and how are they going to do it? Because both the stories from the government and from proponents, I don't think the community are hearing the clear story yet, and that's probably the more important audience we need to be thinking about.
Fantastic. That I don't know if others want to add to that or not, but there's a couple of other quite related questions, I think, as well. This next one, I think maybe Christina or Mary want to lean in on. With transmission lines, we've seen social license come across as a not on my land, my farm. What is the danger that energy projects get pushed more and more into the last areas of high biodiversity in the landscape to achieve social license by not impacting private landholders? But it's really about that balance that we're trying to achieve here. You're on mute, Mary, but that's to be expected. This is the freestyle part of the session where it gets a little bit loose. So thank you.
I'll touch on that, Craig. Yeah, I guess this is one of the challenges, and I guess it comes back to that. What I mentioned is really articulating early on. I mean, going into a biodiversity area or an environmentally rich area is something, you know, that forms part of that decision-making process. So I think this goes into understanding what the constraints of the area are, and why decisions are being made, why the project team is making decisions that they have made. It will either result in quite a lengthy environmental approval process, or, there might be a particular species that might be impacted. So there are a number of factors that go into deciding on a particular alignment, and we really need to communicate that to the community. What are the opportunities? What are the constraints? And really going back to project objectives.
Fantastic. Is there any, are there any thoughts on how we communicate that to landholders in terms of the potential, the choices that need to be made in terms of biodiversity impacts for impacts outside of their land? How do you communicate that to those landholders that by hosting this piece of infrastructure, they are potentially supporting the protection of other areas?
I can make a couple of comments. I think, it's a really tough decision-making process. But these are all risks for the project and risks that the community need to be engaged with. And I think if you think about social license risks quite broadly, it's not just environment, it's just not farm and livelihoods. You need to be holistic about how the community is feeling about each of those different risks, and what are the sentiment issues and the emotional responses to those. If the community is engaged well enough in that risk assessment process, then you're actually giving them the opportunity to understand the different risks and opportunities to mitigate. And maybe their involvement in mitigating the risks on biodiversity or the on-farm risks is the only way you're going to get that the buy-in and a better understanding. So how well we engage and involve the community in some of these pretty tough pretty tough decisions.
There's a bunch of questions that have come through. I'll try and pick another one that might be this one that relates to supply chain, George. Working in the contestable transmission space here in Victoria, it's very difficult to establish long-term strategic supply chain procurement plans due to low visibility on future projects. How can we navigate around this? So effectively, they're making long-term plans for a supply chain when there is a lot of uncertainty that sits around many of these projects, both in the transmission and the large-scale renewables, offshore wind. All these markets are remain highly uncertain. Are there any thoughts that you might have, George, on how we can start to build longer-term plans for supply chain, or some general rules or guidelines that we can follow in developing up those longer-term supply chain plans?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. I think that, as I mentioned in my presentation earlier, supply chain mapping is just a key starting point. And I suppose there are various scenarios under what eventual products will look like and who gets what concessions and product areas. But I think that, early phase supply chain mapping under a few different scenarios would be recommended. And then, as we're talking about, well, what in that supply chain map, where are the key risks around potential sole sourced sub-tier suppliers, high risk locations? So that's sort of my initial reaction to that question, Craig.
Yeah, fantastic. I think it is a difficult one. We can make some decisions that are not reliant on which particular projects go ahead. Correct. Or in what timeframes. We can make have some good processes in place that will get good outcomes regardless of the order and scale of projects that are developed. It's a good question that's come through relating to cumulative impacts. It reads, could the speakers touch on the challenges and opportunities of cumulative impacts and how this interacts with stakeholder impacts and social license? For example, in renewable energy zones, what are the opportunities for projects to collaborate to address some of the challenges you've each raised today. How can we manage stakeholder burnout, where there can be a lot of confusion about differing projects, different comms processes, and a range of projects, etc.? That's a very topical question, particularly with the renewable energy zones, where we do see a need for coordination there.
Oh, I'll take that one, Craig. I think it's really worthwhile, and how this can be addressed is when a community and stakeholder engagement plan is being prepared, you can fall into the trap of just focusing on that project. However, understanding what's going on around that community, not only from a renewable project, but are there other transport projects happening in that area? What's council doing? Really understanding what's going on in that area and how is that going to play in regard to your comms plan, and how do you leverage off that so that the community doesn't get burnt out? So that is something that needs to be done, I would say, in the planning phase. I've worked on transport projects which do this really well, particularly in metropolitan areas where there are roadworks going on in different areas, really knowing what's going on around it and where can we work together, but really making sure that there are processes in place that if a question is asked on a particular project, that it does go to the most appropriate project team. So I think it's about the industry collaborating in regard to delivering these projects and working together and thinking a bit more bigger picture, not just one part of delivering a renewable energy zone or a project, but what is actually going on around and how does it impact the stakeholders?
Right. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Christina, maybe from a broader governance or the role of government or others in helping to make this industry collaboration to happen?
Yeah, look, I think Mary's spot on. It's about how do we look at that slightly higher level integrated approach across different projects and different sectors. Sure, there's a big role for government there. And I think, from what I'm seeing, there are processes, for example, in Victoria, where there's government organisation now, VicGrid, taking a broader strategic view across the state, looking at these interactions and potential strategic opportunities by better coordination and planning. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity and to make it easier on the community and get better outcomes.
Fantastic. We are about at time today, and I want to make sure we stick tightly to time because I know everyone is very busy. Apologies to those who have submitted questions that we haven't been able to get to, but all of us on the call are very contactable and would love to hear from you if you'd like to continue that conversation. We'll make sure that the contact details are provided with the follow-up email. Thank you very much, Christina, George and Mary, for generously sharing your knowledge with us today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope that everyone on the call has gained some valuable insights to take away. I'd also like to thank everyone who has taken the time to join the call today for your interest and involvement in the continuing development of our industry. It's really important that we're all doing this together. Please look out for the next ACON webinar in our ongoing energy transition series. I'd also love to hear any feedback you may have or suggestions for future topics. That we're still open to ideas for the next session. So there will be a follow-up email, as I mentioned, that will include a link to the recording, so you can also share that with your colleagues and networks. And the advantage of the recording is you can fast forward over the bits with me speaking and get right to the important stuff. So keep an eye out for that one. And as mentioned, please reach out to us anytime. The contact details will be included with the email. So thank you all and have a great day.